Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. I'm Samantha, and if you're new here, I'm making a board game slash card game. I'm currently on version 11, playtesting version 10, and my previous video was version 8, version 9. So I'm just here to talk about my progress so far, my journey, and all the mistakes and choices I made in my game design. So version 8 was a particularly interesting stage of my game. I playtested that version the most so far, and I got a lot of good feedbacks regarding the game. It was fun, it was interesting, and it seemed pretty solid from where I was standing. I was particularly focused on form and function over aesthetics. So my game itself had two phases. One was the library phase and one was the collection phase. And the feedback I got from the initial playtest of version 8 was that phase 2 wasn't strong enough. If you won phase 1, you would definitely win phase 2. So phase 2 didn't feel very important. And to address this, I created a different mechanic for phase 2, where it was a swapping mechanic where you swap cards in your deck with cards in the library. And it was a lot more people were a lot more proactive during this phase. It was a lot more engaging, and the game was heading in the right direction. I thought the game was pretty polished by that point, and because the game was felt a little bit more polished, I then struggled to actually improve on the game as a whole. At the time, I was convinced that more playtesting I would figure out the kinks. I playtested more and more and more, but I only needed some minor tweaks. So I felt a little stagnant in terms of how I wanted to improve the game and without changing the game as a whole. So I decided to work on other bits of the game. In my last video, I was very focused on the visual components of the game. It's mainly the card design. And at that point, I thought I got the card design figured out because it was very practical, it was very easy to use, it was engaging. My main concern was whether I needed art. I was leaning on no, because the components on the cards, there was a lot of components, and there wasn't very much space for art to occur. So I needed a neutral opinion on that. So I went to Reddit and I asked the question, does my card design need art? I was demolished. There was a resounding yes. They commented that my card design looked very utilitarian, it wasn't very appealing, it wasn't very thematical, and it looked like it came from an Excel spreadsheet. That was a really harsh truth I needed to hear. Especially the fact that my game wasn't appealing enough was something I needed to force myself to face, especially because I wanted to eventually sell this game. I needed to work on the art a little bit more. So at first I wasn't very concerned about the art because I wanted to iterate really fast, and it wasn't much point of creating really good art when I'm just prototyping. But because I felt like my game was pretty polished, that was no longer the case, so I needed to work on making the aesthetic of the game look a little nicer. So I went to research into how to create characters, how to work on my art skills. I went shopping for books, and I bought a book for character design, but I then realized I had no time to work on my art, and it would take a long time, and I would be better off delegating this to someone who actually could create art. So it put me into a very interesting scenario where it forced me to consider asking people for help on my game or my project, and it forced me into a marketing mindset because my friend asked me for a design brief on how to create the art, and it forced me to consider who I really wanted to reach with my game, what I want them to experience, and how I could emphasize that in my game design. I created mood boards and I created art briefs, and who specifically I was targeting. Once I got the brief out, it was then up to me to actually work on the background, on the card design, to give them something to work. I noticed this Instagram reel where they were doing plaid elements, and I decided I wanted to create some cards that had a plaid design element to it. So this is what I came up with. This is version 9. At the time when I was working on the version 9, I was still playtesting version 8, and I was pitching this game to one of my friends and trying to get him to playtest it, when I realized that things that I thought weren't as important, like the theme, the story, and elements of the game that were more thematic, were actually super important things I needed to consider if I were to pitch my game to someone who wanted to play, because it gave my game a little bit more depth and it helped me explain the game more easily. Even though I had a theme ready, I hadn't really worked on the world building, so that was kind of the next thing I worked on, which was the world building, the story, and I came up with several. Some were directly describing the game that I had created, some were just introducing the theme and kind of leaving it at that. So obviously the introducing the theme stories weren't as good, it didn't really make sense with my game, and I realized really quickly while making the story that my game didn't make much sense logically. I had mechanics in play and there was structure, people were able to play the game, but there was no resounding reason why people should play that game in that way. And because of that, I decided to use some tools such as AI to actually help me refine the story and help me refine the game logic. So AI strengthened my story, which made a lot more sense. And because I realized that I could use AI to improve my project, I decided to try and see what would happen if I used AI to create a board game from a story. It was really interesting because it produced a very generic game that did not seem fun, but it helped me conceptualize and refine my ideas, in the sense of it helped me iterate faster and process my thoughts, to create a like I made adjustments to the generic game and it got it to a stage where the generic game was a lot better than the game I originally had. So I had to kind of kill my baby, and it was tough, but after playtesting version number 10, I realized the confusion that was there, the hesitation that was there when players were initially playing my earlier versions, it was no longer there when they were playtesting version 10. There was a visible difference in the reaction. People weren't as confused, and because they weren't as confused, people were enjoying themselves. There was less clarifying questions. And to be clear, I haven't used AI for everything. I still created the story, I still created the card design, the game design, and everything else. But AI was a great tool in helping me translate my thoughts and feelings into something a lot more tangible. It gave me a better tool to help me phrase sentences and how to be a bit more consistent throughout the game. All in all, after yesterday's playtest, I'm very keen to continue to improve my game, and I'll see you on the next update.